Hi everyone, welcome. In this video, I will be discussing procedure of translation. This will start with introduction. The translation procedure refers to a series of steps that a translator has to follow when doing their job, which is complex and requires special skills. It involves a deep understanding of the meaning contained in the source text, often written in a foreign language. The translator then has to change the meaning in the target text into another language, while trying to preserve as much as possible the original intention of the source text. Of course, this is a difficult task because many cultural factors have to be taken into account to ensure that the original meaning is translated accurately and effectively. Ledy and Tabor, 1969. Next, the steps in the translation procedure can vary depending on a number of factors. Some of these factors may include the complexity of the source text, the difference between the source and the target language, and the level of skills and experience of the translator. In many cases, the translation procedure will include understanding the source text, identifying the translation difficulties that may arise, doing the necessary research to overcome these difficulties, and then carrying out the translation process itself. After the text has been translated, it is also important to check the quality of the target text to ensure that the result reflects the original intention of the source text as accurately as possible. North, 1997. There are also definitions of procedure of translation and also according to experts. Well, definition. Procedure of translation is a series of steps that a translator must follow when performing their task, which involves understanding the source text, identifying translation difficulties, necessary research, and the translation process itself. Here are some definitions of procedure of translation according to experts. The first one, Molina and Albert. Procedure of translation is a procedure to analyze and classify how translation equivalence can be applied to various language units. The second one, Ledy and Tabor. Procedure of translation is a process to reproduce in the receptor language that closest natural equivalent of the source language message, first in terms of meaning and secondly in terms of style. And the third one, North. Procedure of translation is the way that translators use to solve translation problems that arise during the translation process. For the reason, the conclusion from three experts about the procedure of translation is that it is the way we use to solve, classify, and insert translation equivalents into various language units. We don't just repeat what is in the source language to the target language in the most natural way, but we also consider the meaning and the style. Then the procedure of translation also includes the ways we use to overcome the problems that arise in the middle of the translation process.
Borrowing is the simplest of all translation procedure. Borrowing refers a process of transferring the source language into the target language, in which the words of the text becomes loan words, because there is no change of form when transferring source text into the target language. The term of borrowing means a word taken directly from another language. This is often done when the source language word has a specific connotation or cultural significance that cannot be accurately captured by any equivalent word in the target language. Loan words can be adopted into a language in various ways. In some cases, like the English words national and promotion, which become national and promosi in Indonesian. The words are borrowed with no change in form or meaning, making them pure loan words. other times, the borrowed word undergoes slight change in spelling or pronunciation while retaining its original meaning, like accessories becoming accessories and account becoming akun in Indonesian. These are called mixed loan words. Finally, there's loan blending where one part of the word comes from the borrowing language and the other from the receipt language, but the entire meaning is borrowed.
Procedure 2. Calque. Calque is a particular type of borrowing in which the translator borrows an expression from the source text by translating literally every part of the original elements. It can be in lexical or in structural system of the target text. Lexical calque maintains the syntactic structure of the target language while introducing a new way of expression. An example of a lexical calque is pen name, translated into Indonesian as nama pena. Structural calque, on the other hand, introduces a new construction into the language. An example of a structural calque is car wash, translated into Indonesian as mencuci mobil. Both lexical and structural calques can be useful in certain contexts, but they also carry the risk of producing translation that sounds unnatural or confusing in the target language. It is important for the translator to consider the cultural and linguistic differences between the source and target languages when deciding whether to use calque translations.
Procedure 3. Literal translation. In the field of translation, literal translation involves translating the source text exactly as it is, word for word, into the target language. This procedure is often used when translating between two languages of the same family, for example, between French and Italian. It is important to remember that while translating word for word can sometimes be helpful, it is essential for translator to be careful and think about the situation, the type of text they are working with, and the differences between two languages and cultures involved. For example, consider the English sentence, "The cat is out of the bag." If we translate this literally into Indonesian, we get "kucing itu keluar dari tas," which, while grammatically correct, might not be readily understood as it doesn't convey the intended meaning of the English idiom, which is that secret has been revealed. However, in cases where text is straightforward and does not contain any idioms, literal translation can be quite effective. For instance, the English sentence, "I am reading a book," can be literally translated into Indonesian as "saya sedang membaca buku," and the meaning is perfectly received.
Procedure 4. Transposition. According to Vinay and Darbanar in Fenucci, divine transposition is a procedure that involves replacing one word class with another without changing the meaning of the message of the saints. Transposition is a translation procedure that involves changing the grammatical category without altering the meaning of the message. This procedure is often used when the grammatical structure between the source and target language differ significantly. For example, consider the English sentence, "I have a book to read." In the sentence, "to read" is an infinitive verb phrase that describes the purpose of the book. If we were to translate the sentence into Indonesian, we may say, "Saya memiliki buku untuk dibaca." Here, "untuk dibaca" is a passive verb phrase, which is a different grammatical category from the English infinitive. However, the overall meaning of the sentence remains the same.
Procedure 5. Modulation. Modulation by Jeremy Mundai refers to a procedure in translation where there is a change in the point of view or perspective from which information is presented. This change can involve altering the emphasis, tone, or style of the original text to better suit the target audience or to convey the intended meaning more effectively. Modulation allows translator to adapt the text to the cultural and linguistic norm of the target language while maintaining fidelity to the source text content and purpose. For example, Consider the English phrase, "It's raining cats and dogs." A literal translation into Indonesia would be "hujan kucing dan anjing," which would not make sense to an Indonesian speaker. Using modulation, we can translate this phrase to "hujan deras," which literally means heavy rain, and conveys the intended meaning of the English idiom. In example, modulation allows the translator to maintain the intended meaning of the source text while ensuring that the translation is understandable and culturally appropriate for the target audience.
Procedure 6. Equivalence. Catford defines equivalence in procedure translation as the procedure of finding appropriate linguistic units in the target language that carry the same intended meaning as the source language units. Equivalence can be attained at different levels, including the level of words, text, content, situation, and imagery. Specific parts of one text may have different degrees of equivalence, which means that it is a descriptive. For instance, consider the English idiom "bite the bullet," which means to face a difficult or unpleasant situation with courage and determination. A literal translation into Indonesian would be "menggigit peluru," which wouldn't make much sense to an Indonesian speaker. However, using the equivalence procedure, we can translate these idioms to "menelan pil pahit," which literally means swallow the bitter pill, and conveys a similar meaning of enduring a tough situation.
Procedure 7. Adaptation. Adaptation is a translation procedure that involves changing the cultural element of a source text to equivalence that makes sense in the target language when the object or situation referred to in the source text is unknown in the target language culture. The main goal of adaptation is to make the translated text feel as natural and relevant as possible to the target audience, while still conveying the same intended message as the source text. For example, the English phrase "as white as snow." This phrase describes something extremely white or pure. While a literal translation into Indonesian might be understandable, it wouldn't sound natural or familiar to the audience, as snow is uncommon in Indonesia. Instead, we can use "seperti kapas" or "as white as cotton" as a more suitable translation. Kapas or cotton resonates better with Indonesian culture, similar to how snow resonates with American culture.